Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to What the Hell is Water. It is Tuesday.
What is... So far, this is on par with our Tuesday.
Yes.
Our Tuesday is acting like a Monday.
Mike's falling over, stream issues, but, what can you do? Welcome back, Ryder.
Yeah, thanks. I just got back from a trip, and that's always kind of a interesting thing to just take. So I went to Brooklyn for about 4 days, and then just got back, and yeah, I got to see some friends that I hadn't seen in a long time. Got to be in a different city. It's really kind of the first trip I've taken since COVID. I've done little work trips, but and I did the residency out in Chattanooga. But other than that, like this one was like walking around amidst lots and lots of people, and then also sort of seeing the different culture because everyone's like masked up, and then you can walk around Texas and no one's got a mask on, and you're just like, oh, people are thinking about this differently.
Guns up, mask down, brother.
Is that how it works?
That's how it works here in Texas. If the virus comes near us, I'm just going to shoot it.
Is that... Can you do that? Are you that good of a marksman?
Those masks didn't work that well, but my guns work every time. Well, just to cover our bases here. How dare you? Oh, my goodness. You traveled, you went and did all of that stuff.
You.
Where's your respect for humanity? Oh, my God. And on the other side, wow, good for you, man.
Yeah,
I'm glad to hear you got out there.
It was really good to see some friends and feel like a human again.
Yeah, it's good to, explore and get those feelings of human connection that we need as an animal. Yeah, and then in the middle, it's just like, why do I care?
Whatever.
Yeah.
That's I think
cool, bro. I was working all day. Wow, just go off and prance to Brooklyn and have this. Yeah. Wow, I don't want to hear about you. I got kids, I'm putting food on the table. Like, you gonna tell me about your vacation you're taking during this pandemic? Like, come on, man.
As a matter of fact, I do want to talk. No.
No, okay. So now that we got that out of the way,
how great my life is. Yeah.
No, good, man. I'm glad you went. The thing that's one of the more important things to me about traveling is food. Did you get at least like one good meal?
Oh yeah. We got some really good Indian food. We got some really great ramen. We also just almost ordered everything and ate it at our friend's house. They have a place in Brooklyn, so we just ate there almost every meal.
Well, they have like 1 minute drone delivery now over there, right?
yeah, I think so. I mean, if the guy's name is Drone. Yeah, but they have these guys that'll just swing by in their little scooters and drop your food off, and it was all the food was good. They they always know all the right spots to order from. But yeah, we didn't eat in any restaurants, and I thought that's just like some of the rules. So there's different rules that everyone has. And so at one point we stepped into a pub for all of a few minutes and then popped back out. It was well,
the trick is you go in for 5 minutes and 59 seconds and you go out for air.
And
you hit the 6 minute mark.
I just hold my breath inside. 6 minutes.
There's just one time I held my breath, and next day I don't know what happened, man. I blacked out from the alcohol.
I had a horrible headache, but I didn't even get a drink down. Because,
I tried to straw through my nose, but it's kind of hard.
Right through my mask into my nose.
Oh no, but that's fun, and unfortunate that the trip has to have that color on it, but it makes it an interesting
just a different experience,
way, right?
And get to sort of see some things. I did go to the Brooklyn Museum, hadn't done that in years at this point, and
is that the full name, or is there a bigger name?
It's probably called something like the Brooklyn Art Museum.
Okay.
And BART. Or the Art Museum of Brooklyn. Whatever. Flip it around, Google search it, it'll show up.
Gotcha.
But
it is art though. Is the main point.
It's art, and I kind of both like and dislike that museum. It always seems like a little bit of a mess. They're kind of like half really awesome, like old school collection, and half.
Hold on, you talking about Brooklyn center. Or the art?
Yeah, right. Brooklyn itself.
Yeah.
It's an old school
half
collection.
Put together, half not.
It's kind of a mess. Yeah, which is also sort of the joy of it, right? Is not knowing what you're going to get. You walk into this room, it'll be like all these Turner and Church paintings, and basically those are just like really classical, beautiful landscapes, and then like in the middle of them is some sort of like video, and this one was a video of somebody's kind of fro that was like had this light behind it. It was sort of shifting, and it was this kind of abstracted landscape through hair, and I was like, and so it was really quite beautiful to kind of think about the sunlight peeking through the clouds and all these classical landscapes, and then kind of having this inverse of the sun sort of peeking through somebody's hair.
was that a painted thing or literally a video projector?
That was a video projector in the middle of all these paintings.
Literally through a afro wig?
I don't think it was a wig. I think it was literally somebody's hair, and then they had a light behind them shining through the hair, and so they'd shake their head.
Oh, they were literally sitting there as like a performance art.
Yeah, so that was the video we were watching. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So we were watching a video of this.
I was thinking the light was projected through the hair, but they were sitting in front of the camera.
And there was a light behind them.
Okay,
and so the whole thing was recording, and so it was a black and white video piece. But that's kind
cool,
of an example of what you get going through the museum. So it's this kind of mashup thing where you're coming in and you know that like, I don't know, Church has amazing landscape paintings, right? Or Turner has great landscape paintings. So you kind of will turn this corner and you see this classical thing, and it's juxtaposed with this very modern thing.
That's kind of cool. And I mean, I guess I don't know that much about museum, but I'd be curious if that, on the more unique side of things, that diverse of a thing in the same room. I mean, it's cool because it sounded like I still had that same theme. Like, this is still a landscape, just viewed in a different way, which I think is pretty cool. And also, I mean, it seems like it's right on point with the whole New York type of thing. It's like, hey, we've got old, we've got new, we've got black, we've got blue, we've got me, we've got you. I don't know who else, you know? I don't know who else who.
Yeah, it was really good. Now, on the other hand, there's critiques of it, right? Which is that by...
In art? No.
Oh, man. Yeah, like whatever you do is going to be somehow wrong.
That's life, though, right?
Yeah, I suppose so. Especially when you're trying something slightly different. You know, you're not giving the paintings their due. You're not giving the video its due. You're mashing them up into a conversation. So neither one of them is actually the thing the artist intended. You're creating your own art piece by mashing them together and then expecting people to draw other conclusions from it. And so there's things like that you can talk about. It's always going to be something. But anyway, that's one of the...
Well, I mean, you got to give them something to talk about. Otherwise, what would they talk about?
Yeah. How you would not be an interesting museum.
Isn't that like, I mean, I jest, but isn't that a big part of the purpose? I mean, as a guy who curated, what would you say, over 100 exhibits? Yeah. So, I mean, what do you think about? We'll do a quick aside. This isn't related to recap or anything, but I've got to ask now. When you are curating, we're going to put a pin in this. We're going to come back to this after we do the recap. But we're going to talk about that today, impromptu topic. When you're curating an art museum or an exhibit, what are the things that you think about? And I want to get back to more about your trip. But real quick, let's recap yesterday and do the intro since we're a little behind, and then we'll just jump into the episode, right? Yesterday, first off, apologies for those of you who hopped online expecting us. We had a last-minute cancellation / postponement to today. So today is episode 53. So welcome back. Today is Tuesday, which is not quite hump day, but it's not quite Monday, so it's in between. So that makes it a good thing. I guess it depends on what side of the hump you. And we talked about before about
we're climbing the hill right now.
Yeah, is it a one hump or is it a two hump kind of camel? That makes a difference.
It's a valley in the middle.
Yeah, you just like it's like a big slide, but then it's also a big hill. So I don't know. It's up to you guys how to interpret that. But yeah, on Friday, we talked about time blocking. What else did we talk about?
Geez, I'm blanking on it now. Man,
well, good for us.
Technology stuff, with the lighting.
Yes, we had another thing with the tits. We had to illuminate the lights. This is technology stuff. It's an acronym for TITS, to get people like you to view. And it was funny because it was later that day. I was like, dude, we have 100 views by like noon, and I texted Danielle, and she's like, well, what'd you guys do different? I was like, well, it was like the second or third day in a row we had titled and descriptioned the stream before we posted it. And then I was like, wait a second. We have tits in the title. Of course people clicked on it.
So, we're going to need some other salacious titles.
We are, So if
anyone in the audience...
if you have acronyms that take very salacious, sexy, or otherwise things and then turn them into somewhat mundane things that we can be like, got you, but now keep watching. We're all about that. So please write in with those responses.
Drop it, drop them in the chat, and then we'll just see if we can get more comments on the chat as well.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect.
Blow it all up.
Perfect. Yeah, I like that idea.
It is funny because I think you sent a podcast to me a while back, and the guys on it were talking about the level of their title influenced their views, and you just are you want to believe that your content is what's making your show great, but clickbait's tough to ignore. So a lot of people just jump into that.
Well, and we'll talk a little bit more about that another day, because that ties in a lot with marketing, and there's actually different types of clickbait. And there was a really good video I saw on it that defined it. And basically, as someone who is trying to create good things and trying to do things for the right reasons, is like, yes, you should still use clickbait, but here's a way you can do it where it's all right, and it makes sense, and it's just, and it actually, you're still delivering on the thing, right? But yeah, there's something there about, you can't get around the psychology of clickbait. Works for a reason. It gets to your caveman brain or whatever. And so as someone what doesn't matter what you're trying to do, if you're trying to market something, it's something you need to at least think about, because at the end of the day, if you don't, you can be doing the best, you could be having the the quest for the thing, the Holy Grail. You have the Holy Grail, but if nobody knows about it, then it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, you can't just give it a scientific title sounding paper kind of thing and then expect people to figure out that you're actually talking about the Holy Grail.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly. And then the few people who figure it out, they just come and kill you and take the Holy Grail for themselves.
right.
Natural. Seen it time and time again.
In so many movies,
Indiana Jones and the Bitcoin crypt. Coming out. Theaters near you.
Oh, man. Yeah, the crystal Bitcoin, the NFT. Yeah.
And the Dogecoins.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Oh, man. So we talked a little bit on Friday. We had our tits where we talked about lighting, and we talked about a little bit about the difference between like an incandescent bulb and an LED bulb, and why you might want to buy those. But then we also talked a little bit about the power equation, P equals IV, power equals current times voltage. And we had a little bit of a tit within the tit. Maybe we should call it an nipple. I don't know. But where it was just about the phone charger, and it was like, hey, we're talking about lights here, right? But power equals current times voltage. But here's another really common thing that you can look at and say, hey, here is a USB charger that you use to charge your phone. But whether or not you realize it, some of them are charging your phone twice as fast, if not more, than other chargers, including faster than the ones that a lot of times the manufacturers give you with the phone. And so we just showed you how to do that equation so you guys can figure that out for yourself, especially as you're buying phone chargers right now, probably for stocking stuffers and things like that. But yeah, any other recap on Friday from you?
Yeah, no, I think our challenge was around time blocking as well, that we wanted you to spend some time just blocking out chunks of your day, and Reed was talking about them as being meetings with yourself, and then respecting those meetings and trying to stick with them.
Yeah, and we're going to talk some more about time blocking. We kind of introduced the topic and started to show what it might look like a little bit visually in a calendar, and then realized, you know what, let's do another time where we can have a more focused, and also frankly where I can better see the computer so we can walk through with some concrete examples of what that might look like. But the whole idea of time blocking, like you said, is you set those meetings with yourself because you think in advance. A big phrase I don't know if I heard it somewhere, if I made it up, or it's a conglomeration of a whole bunch of things I've heard, but ever since I've heard it in this way, I've repeated it a lot, which is separate the do from the think. So think ahead of time and then do another time. And if you're trying to think that whole time while you're doing, sometimes that leads to too much friction and leads you not being able to do the thing. And as a solo entrepreneur, that's been a thing I've really had to focus on, because literally my entire day is making thousands and thousands of choices about this. Is this good enough? Should I do this? Should we do that? Should we do this? And so it's like, all right, sometimes you just got to do that thinking up front and say, hey, what's important? What are the factors I need to consider? Let's figure all these things out right now. And so then when I'm in the zone doing the thing, doing the actual work, I don't have to be thinking about all of those things. And so time blocking helps you do that.
Yeah. It's pretty handy the few times I have used it. I tend to try to automate my life so that maybe I don't necessarily have to time block, but I think of my whole day as a job. And, blocking off chunks of it, not getting notified, not getting distracted, things like that. I find all those things tremendously help. And of course, I also watch myself getting distracted, and then I have to be like, it's okay, dude. You'll be fine. You're still highly productive. It's okay.
Right. And that's part of the trap that we want to make sure to warn people about is with all of these productivity things, make sure that you're not going in so far to where you're beating yourself up and you're giving yourself a hard time, and then maybe even becoming something that is worse than what you were, trying to strive to be, right? And so it's something we always are cautious about when talking with you guys about that. So The last thing on the lights, I just wanted to mention one other thing we talked about was color temperature. And I think it's above 4,500 Kelvin, is 4,500 K. So if you're looking and you see something that's above that, that's what makes something look like daylight versus being a warmer color. And we talked a little bit about how that affects the feel of a place. Maybe you might want to have daylights and you're out while you're working, all that kind of stuff, but maybe not while like in your bedroom or something like that. It's kind of personal preference too, though.
That sort of super bright light seems like, hospital lab. Like it seems like it's almost like sterilization, and people think, oh, I want daylight in my house. And then you get it and you're like, oh, no, I don't.
Well, cool. Well, that was Friday for you guys. And so let's go ahead and run the intro and we'll get back to today. Helpful for life. And welcome back. This is What the Hell is Water? I'm Reed Garcia, the founder of Helpful for Life.
And this is Ryder Richards, guy that takes trips.
Guy that takes trips.
About to go on another one, unfortunately, too.
Oh yeah. Man.
Just keeps going.
You tripping, man?
Totally.
Yeah, man.
Right now,
I can't
on the
wait.
couch.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
If you look over there at those blinds, man, they'll come out and they'll eat you. It'll be great, but in a good way, man.
Why would you take me down the bad trip?
Like it consumes your ego, man.
Oh, well, in that case, that's fine.
Yeah.
I don't want an ego. Egos are bad. They're like tumors.
Today is December 14th, 2021. It is Tuesday, as aforementioned, right before Hump Day, which is tomorrow, and after Monday, which was yesterday. In case you need to remember what day of the week it is, we are here
That's
for
really
you.
what we are. We're just a super fancy calendar.
We are.
That's what this whole show is about. We just you could glance at your phone, but
Yeah, I think actually we're going to create a new AI assistant. It's called Dreary. Instead of Siri, you say, "Hey Dreary," and it just gives you this really jaded answer.
Yeah, it is Tuesday.
Yeah,
that comes after Monday.
The low is actually 55 today, and that's really what we should concentrate on. I mean, the temperature it gets up to 85, but really it spends most of the hours in the 50s and the 60s.
And your glass of coffee is half full.
Yeah, but it's cold because you took too long to get it. Oh. But don't reheat it in the microwave because that gets rid of all the flavonoids. They'll just evaporate, let me tell you. So, hey, Drury, coming to a store near you, just pre-order now.
Yeah, I think
$5,000.
Once again, we've been trying to crowdsource these options for our new invention so that we can become, very wealthy. Let us know who you think that one's going to do.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so for today's topic, we are going to talk about the importance of writing. And we're going to put a pencil in that for a second, and then a pen. Dang it.
A keyboard.
Yeah, we're gonna pause on that one. We're gonna talk about that in a second because we wanted to have a quick little impromptu chat with Ryder as we were talking about his trip to New York. He put on his beret and his cigarette, and he's like, "Oh, hey, Art, I don't know why Art got French. You tell me if this is close or not."
That's very artsy.
Yes, he's like, why is it here? It should be in a room by itself where it can be really enjoyed. Like, what is going on here? Yeah. And so he was telling us in these very sophisticated ways. If you don't believe me, just rewind. You'll go see it yourself.
With my fake French accent.
Yes, oui. And I was like, oh, well, okay. As a guy who's curated now over 100 exhibits, I'd be really curious to know, like, all right, what goes through your head? What are the factors that you think about? And so, yeah, I'll give that softball to you and let you answer that how you want. So when you are thinking of and designing a art gallery, or on the flip side, when you are going and looking at an art gallery, what are you thinking about?
Yeah, so I think I approach it a little differently as an artist whenever I'm approaching a gallery. So, for instance, there is a piece in the Brooklyn Museum that's called The Dinner Party by Judy Chicago, and it's a permanent installation. And it's this big triangular table, and it takes up this big triangular space, and you walk inside, and it's all like mirrors and black walls, and yet there's these ceramics, and each plate is I'm not going to describe the whole piece because that will take us off into a different direction. But what happens is this is a permanent installation, and yet it's sort of bordered by these walls on the outside. So there's somebody else, they had given these sort of rooms on the outside as art spaces. So it's like 3 different rooms on the outside of this triangle that's floating in the middle that has this other art piece inside of it. And so I'm just like, this is difficult to curate around because this piece in the center is kind of a touchstone of feminist art that is referenced in all the books. So what do you put on the outside? Not only that, not who do you choose only, but also when you do choose that person as an artist, you would hope that they would be reacting to the piece that's on the interior, because everything's about context. Like, sure, you can just show up with whatever you have and stick it on the walls and claim it to be good art, but I really am interested in how things work together in context. So when you start zooming out, right, there's a feminist art piece in the center that's a touchstone. There's going to have to be artwork around it. You would want that to somehow incorporate. We're also in the Brooklyn Art Museum. What's the history of the Brooklyn Art Museum? What's the history of Brooklyn? What is the concept we're taking on here? Are we trying to move somebody into modernity? Are we trying to like talk about the past? Like what are the goals with the show, and how does it all link together? So you start getting, at least that's the way I start processing that information. So when I was at a community college coordinating shows, I would say about half to 3/4 of the shows were really about the community. Showing local art, showing college art, showing photographs, showing some of that. And then I would bring in other shows as a way to sort of expand the conversation or discourse of what art can be, how it can be approached, ways of thinking about it. So sort of setting up programming over time. So when you're, as a curator, I think you can think about things in a lot of different ranges, and then you have to be very cautious of what you pull in. If you're going to do group shows all the time, then maybe you don't actually let anyone see what a single individual artist can do or look like. And sometimes I think those visions are very powerful, and they get kind of complicated when you start trying to curate a conversation between works. However, a conversation between works can be very enjoyable for a lot of people, especially for people who aren't accustomed to sort of, let's say they're not sort of visually sort of savvy enough to pick up on all the references and historical comments being made by maybe a really sophisticated artist. So sometimes we need to like set things up as sort of baselines to get people educated up to that level. So there's a lot of things about education that happen when you're curating. Now, when you come in as a solo artist, you can be thinking about that as well, but I don't know a whole lot of artists that think about educating the public through their exhibits in that same way, even though they do think about somehow who they're going to be, who will be viewing the show, the context in which it's viewed. Do you do things like leave lots of literature laying around for people to read? Do you put lots of wall text on explaining what you're doing? Or do you just go for like one big movement, one big thing that takes up the space and activates it in a way that's super compelling and experiential? So the shows all kind of operate in different ways, and it just kind of depends, I think, on the context, which is me talking about it as who I am. A lot of other artists are like, I just make paintings. And if I get a show, there will just be a painting on the wall, or I just make these photographs. These photographs will just go on the wall. And increasingly it's, I make digital media art. I do videos. I do things like that. And so then you can get really caught up in space and lighting and sound absorption. And you can get really caught up in how the piece looks. Like, is it, it's interesting to sort of bump into people who are really good at this stuff, because I have a buddy up there that talks about this a lot, that the sound quality was awful. They were $100 speakers with a $100,000 projector. So the audio quality is crud and the video quality is great, or you'll have the inverse. Something was shot in SD, but it's being projected as if it's HD, and you start bumping at all these things, and then you wonder if the viewing audience can pick up on any of this at all. And I would assume subliminally they can. Yeah. But, it's also the other thing when you're doing audio pieces, there's a lot of problems with sound bleed. So if I'm in a group show and I made a painting, but somebody else has a video and it's like somebody's screaming or tires squealing in the background, then that's now attributed to my painting. So when you're curating the shows, it's really difficult to think about all those things.
Yeah, no, that's a lot to think about, and I want to talk more about that another day. Not really fair to say, hey, all this thing you did and spend all these years on and all this effort thinking about, not explain to me in 5 minutes.
No, it's just like that's just an overview of like the way my brain starts processing when we talk about it.
Yeah, no, but I appreciate you sharing, and my main takeaway is that at the end of the day, it's all about the user experience. Right. And your job as a curator, and I'd even broaden it to say as a creator, right, is to think about what that end user experience is going to be. One of the things I thought you said was interesting was talking about how, okay, well, this art piece, when viewed by itself, is one thing, but when it's viewed in context with other things, has a different thing and will be looked at differently. And then my mind went to is like, okay, well, surely most works are not permanent displays. And then I was like, okay, well then that means if I am the artist, how would I want my thing viewed? Like, because you said like, I don't know if you were implying, but I feel like maybe you were. Let me know what your thoughts are on whether or not artists would want their piece to be by itself, to be, in a spot where it is in a room all by itself with the perfect lighting conditions for itself versus, being a part of something else. Because I would honestly, I don't know artists, so you tell me. I guess you.
Oh, I mean, my thought would always be that, that most artists would like their work shown alone. A lot of times, though, you can be commissioned to make a piece in reaction to other pieces. A museum will contact you and say, this is what we're doing, and then you build your work around it. So that's always kind of an interesting and fun proposition if you want to get into that. But yeah, sometimes your piece is sort of shoehorned in without really your say, or you're just so, like, if it's the Brooklyn Museum, like, I don't like, just getting that line on my resume would be so nice.
Right.
That it's like, well, sure, I don't really think of the piece that way, but it's really kind of hard to hold on to your sort of respect and your sort of I don't know, your sort of professionalism and your own sort of values whenever somebody's offering you something like as a gateway that might get you to actually a larger audience, more exposure, and maybe eventually another show in another larger museum. And you would be working towards a solo show where eventually you could have your solo vision, but along the way there's lots of little sort of, I don't know, you can call them compromises, but they're also just sort of challenges. Like, how can you handle this space? How can you handle this? What if your piece does get in here? How are you going to frame it and contextualize it so that you come off looking really good instead of come off as looking like you're sort of trying to steal thunder from other pieces for yourself? Like, so that's where the sort of politics and optics come in, and a lot of framing and language shows up. So it's kind of an interesting play. Like, how do you climb the ladder without sort of occasionally having to compromise?
Yeah. Yeah, and the short answer is probably you can't unless you're lucky.
Yeah,
I had to guess,
very
right?
Lucky. Yeah.
But yeah, that's interesting. A nice little peek behind the eyes of a museum curator. And museums are something that I've grown to appreciate a lot more in the recent years. When Danielle and I did the RV thing, we were traveling around. Museums were something that we went to, and I don't know if I've always been interested in museum, but definitely in the last few years. And I mean, big surprise, I'm a curious guy, so I guess it makes sense that I like learning about things, and the benefit of traveling around the country is you can see some of the best museums in the country, and learn about things that you wouldn't have otherwise, and then also wonder, like, why is this here? So for example, the World War I Museum, the National World War I Museum, is in Kansas City, and even though I went there, I don't remember why it's there. It's a good museum, but I'm like, I don't know why it's there. And then there's the World War II Museum, which is in New Orleans. And that is like top 10 museum in the world, I think. That's like won awards and stuff. That one's really cool. And the one in the World War I is also cool, especially because World War I is one of those things I feel like a lot of people don't really understand that well, because also the reason and why it started was also kind of just a little hazier, not as clear as Nazi bad, Allies good, go get, right. Didn't make quite as clean of a storyline. But anyways,
by the way, sorry,
you're good.
Strange aside, we were trying to play trivia, and it was like, who is 1938's Time Man of the Year?
1938 Times Man of the Year, Adolf Hitler.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, there's these little things that show up, and you're just like, I apparently don't understand the context.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's I would be curious to know the context in that one for sure.
Yeah, like
because
that's.
Because, yeah, it's one of the things where it's like, people like to paint, especially, revisionist history, like, oh, Nazi bad, like big brushstroke. And it's like, well, there was some things they were doing before it got so extreme that potentially could have been argued as good, but I don't know enough to really step into that hairy waters.
No, I'm just sort of like.
But it is interesting context.
These are the things about the museum
for
that
sure
are so great, is they can offer that sort of context and go, oh wow, I had no idea, like, exactly how this came about, until basically we're to the cartoon version where every movie now it's like, you need a bad guy, like we're
right.
talking about Red Notice or whatever the other day, and it was just like, oh, of course the Nazis are the bad guys, like they're just like the default bad guy now. And of course they are bad, but there's this other kind of side of it too, of just like, it almost gets cartoonified at some point without really understanding. You just automatically know this thing without really understanding the backstory.
Right. Versus knowing whatever archduke or something that
Franz Ferdinand.
that got assassinated and started. And it's like, well, it's the silent stab heard around the world. I think that's what they say.
Okay, that sounds good.
No, I totally don't think they say that at all.
I like it. Silent stab.
Well, so thanks for sharing that with us. The last thing I wanted to point out was, as someone who's curating these museums, is not only do you have to think about that experience, but you have to think about it through all of these different lenses. You think about it through the critic who's coming in. They know all of these things. They've got all of this higher level intelligence and knowledge that's relevant to the topic, and they're judging it. They're looking at it, and they're not only thinking about it for themselves, but they maybe are thinking about it, especially when it comes to something that's they consider important for people to know and for people to see. Well, how are you doing that justice, Mr. Museum, on talking about that thing, about showing that thing? And so I could see some people getting really emotional and heated about this type of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've
amazing.
dealt with plenty of people on your side.
Yeah, there's people who are critical and not thrilled about things.
Yeah.
And it's also fascinating as well when you're operating in a world where people are kind of like, my work is better than that work.
Right.
Because they're also sort of fighting for survival, and you're sort of a gatekeeper when you're in those positions. And being a gatekeeper means whatever you privilege or champion or whatever you show is sort of perpetuating something, or it's giving somebody a platform to speak. And we're learning a whole lot more about that. The problems with people giving the wrong platforms, or straight white men prompting up other straight white men, and things like that, and how that can be a kind of a perpetual cycle that needs to be broken or shaken up. And so there's a lot of sort of things in there. And I haven't been curating in the last maybe 5 years or so, 6 years, and so
I bet things got even more hectic in the last 5 years.
Yeah, it's gotten probably much hairier and stranger for a lot of people, and other people know there is kind of a righteousness behind their mission that allows them to know exactly where they're going, and they can sort of pursue that with vigor and confidence, and good for them. Like, do it, like, go tackle it.
Yeah. Well, the last thing I was gonna say, and we'll move on, was they got a design for that lens, right? But then they also got a design for, this is a random dude who happened to stumble in here, and this might be his first and or only exposure to art, and how much do I care about getting his interest and getting him plugged in and things like that? Because sometimes that's as little as it takes as someone to go into a museum and kind of be inspired or curious or awed by something, and then that hooks them, right? And maybe that doesn't... this is the thing about the art world, right? It's like people come into a museum and, sure, some people are pulling out their checkbook and doing that, if that's even that type of museum, right? But then
most of these
aren't, right? And then it's like, so it's like, people are paying, and sometimes they're not even paying, but it's all kind of playing the long game, right? But anyways, last aside, I promise, was... I just wanted to share my first kind of time when I started to get a little bit more into art was actually in Las Vegas. We were in, I think it's the shops at Caesar's Palace. They've got the big blue. Have you been there before?
Yeah.
Blue cloud skies going up over the thing, and it's an indoor mall, and there's restaurants and stuff like that. And then there's a little art gallery in there, and I was just walking around, and we saw this 3-dimensional canvas where I can't believe this ties in so well, but picture a 2-humped camel.
Well played.
I honestly, it was not the reason I brought it up, but it worked out well. But you've got a flat wall, right? A flat canvas. Well, there's actually 2 humps that came up out of the canvas, and based on where you stood, the picture looked different because it was painted along the whole way, and the way that the shadows worked and the way the perspective and stuff, it shifted where you stood. Not only where you stood in an arc around it, but how close you were, how far you were. And then, of course, that was also where they took the piece, and then they said, well, let's go look at it in this viewing room. And then they said, okay, let me turn the lights down. Now look at this. And they pointed out, well, you notice this, and I don't remember off the top of my head. And then now let's do it in daylight. Let's do it. Here's what it looked like in a different color temperature to tie into the tips that we talked about on Friday, about how lighting can change what people see, what people perceive, what people notice, what they don't notice. And so that was kind of when I was hooked. I was like, all right, that's really cool. And I like that concept. And now every time I see an art piece, especially if I'm like really looking at it, I'm standing at different spots. I'm trying to focus on different parts of the thing. And if I can like see it in different lighting, I'm like, this is cool. It made me see it in a whole other dimension, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to sort of learn and get into there, and it's also part of like one of the things that, because of course I taught for a long time, and one of the
Long
things
time.
a long time, the teaching, like just getting people educated is sort of primary. And when I was in this last trip, I went and visited one of my friends who was an architect, and we were talking about the difficulties with clients, but long-term processes, and how so much of it comes back to education. And I've also have friends who are artists who their shows have been canceled or this, that, and the other because the education aspect was handled incorrectly or not handled at all. And so people, the work was talking exactly about the kind of issues that needed to be talked about, yet the museum did not prepare the groundwork in advance for the conversation. And so there's all these kind of things when you're doing socially sensitive work that is sets of traps. But it is interesting to think about it just coming back to the physical object as kind of the start for this educational process before you start getting more and more sort of entwined into these other levels.
Yeah. Well, clearly there's a lot we could talk about there, and I do want to tap into that a little bit more on another day. So let's make sure we do that. So so for those of you just joining us, we're finishing up talking a little bit about what Ryder thinks about as he's creating an exhibit. For those who aren't aware, he has history in art. He was an art professor and also curated over 100 exhibits, and he's an artist himself. And also the fact that, I mean, I guess I don't know, but being an artist yourself versus just being a curator who's never done art, which I don't know how rare that is or not, but it changes the way you look at it and the way you think about it, and all of the factors that you take into play as you're considering what to make, how to make an exhibit, or if you're visiting an exhibit, all of the lenses you're viewing it through. You say, hey, well, how did they do with this? How did they do with that? And now we're going to transition into the importance of writing. And this is the second part of... Sorry. This is the second part of our two-part series, Reader and Writer. Believe it or not, it was probably a couple weeks in before we realized that literally our names were Read and Writer, like reading and writing for those of you who are missing it. And it was like, well, we probably should do that.
We should probably talk about this.
Yeah. So we did reading, I think a couple weeks ago. It's been a little bit, so we'll link that, in the places eventually. And today I wanted to talk about writing. And so first, let's go ahead and just start off with I'd be curious, give me the background on your experience with writing throughout the ages. I mean, do you remember when you first kind of like got into it, and then maybe did you fall out of it, and then how does it stand today?
Oh man, I always kind of enjoyed it and was pretty good at it. I don't know why, but I think of art and writing going together. And so then that was going all the way back into like middle school or something, and high school and coming through that. So I always was, decent at it, but it was spending most of my time doing artwork or something like that. And then, or trying to play guitar or something dumb, playing sports. And so I was doing things like that. And then midway through, I think I got into it in college. I was asked to do this paper on Maya art history, essentially.
Like Mayan?
Mayan, okay. Yeah. And I don't think you're supposed to say Mayan.
Okay.
Oh, Maya.
So just to be clear, the civilization.
Yes.
That was
pre-Aztec.
Maya.
Yeah.
Maya.
Yes.
And then is a Mayan like a person who's from Maya?
I don't know.
Been
I
a
was
while
just
since
sort
you
of
wrote that
taught
paper,
out of it
huh?
in the class.
Yeah.
Like they were just like, quit doing that.
But this is in like South America and maybe Central America.
Yeah. Mostly Mexico, but a little further south as well. And so I wrote some sort of paper that was just it was supposed to be like a 5-page paper, and I turned it into like an 18-page paper.
Nice.
And the lady was like, maybe you should be getting a degree in this, like a master's degree.
Oh, wow.
Because like I just went so far down the rabbit hole. And so I remember doing that. I remember writing a paper about Bob Dylan one time and really getting engaged
you still have
in
that
the
paper?
Process. I don't think I do.
Dang. I want to read these papers now.
Yeah. So I got super into the process of sort of researching and sort of regurgitating, and then
on a typewriter, by the way, context.
Oh no. This was all handwritten by candle.
Like,
You know,
you're a
I
little
would,
lamp.
I would actually collect the soot from the candle and turn it into ink,
And
so I could
that way you
continue
could do
writing
it.
with my
Nice.
quill.
Man, you did so
Yeah,
much work
it
back
was-
then.
ah,
Back
yeah.
in the day. After working a hard day on the farm,
Yes, right about.
how did you find the
I'd
energy?
come home and write about Bob Dylan. But yeah, so I was doing some of that kind of stuff. So enjoyed it. Ended up doing a lot of art criticism. It's not necessarily criticism as much as reviews of art. That was always kind of my point, is to communicate ideas through writing rather than to be like hypercritical. So yeah, I've had a career of it. For a while, I ran an arts review site for about 7 years. It was called Utopia, and Utopia was based around doing very concise 100-word art reviews of exhibitions or artists and their shows, and so or singular artworks even. And so that was kind of a fun project, but I've been paid to write on a few occasions and still do it occasionally for myself. And now that I'm doing the podcast, I find that writing itch gets scratched by doing that.
Because you write a script beforehand.
I do.
Yeah.
I write everything out before jumping into the podcast.
Yeah, so which requires, you're researching, and then you're writing things out, and then you're shifting it, and then
Yes.
you're performing it.
Which is, instead of here where we're being sort of live and fun, mine gets kind of tightened up sometimes.
Well, it's just a different art form, right?
Yeah.
And a different type of thing, and a different skill, and pros and cons to both, for sure. So for me with writing, I remember the first bright spot in my history with writing was 4th grade. And I was raised here in Texas, in McKinney, actually. And in 4th grade is the year where the standardized test involves writing. And so that's the year where they start to really push it at school. And like, all right, here, start teaching you to this, do more, practice this, all that kind of stuff. That's how the teachers, that's what they say.
Do more, practice more
do more,
stuff.
write letters, things. See, I would be a good writing teacher.
That's...
Yes.
Yeah. Let's move on really quickly.
Yeah. So yeah, I had a little bit of a knack for it, and I was submitted to something, I guess, and I was a rising star. Ooh, and I was in some little booklet of all the people from Texas who had submitted and gotten awarded, and there was some trip to Austin that we were awarded, which I don't remember if I went or not. Sorry, Mom. It's funny, later on, Danielle, my wife, we met, and I was like, oh yeah, I was this rising star, and she's like, I was a rising star too, but in 3rd grade, 1 year before you, or something like that. I was like, great. Yeah.
Not
Well, she
that
is
it's
a writer now, so
competition,
maybe it's good. But yeah, and I'm not gonna call him out by name, but that 4th grade teacher is someone who is extremely influential, and I really appreciate you doing that and showing me the value of writing and how important it is, because that's something that stuck with me my entire life, and I think it's affected me even up to today. However, kind of like reading, a similar kind of story with that was, as things shifted less from write about what you want and the more loose things, it went to more scholarly things, and hey, you got to write about this thing, or you got to read this book and then write about it, and writing became more of a thing that I didn't really want to do. Is that related to people telling me to do it? Probably. Is it related to being some topics maybe that I wasn't the most interested? Maybe. But regardless, I kind of stopped writing. And then so basically my writing then was instant messenger, making my MySpace profile top notch. That paragraph,
tuning up that one paragraph,
and then I had the background song too, where it's like, oh, you got to choose. It's all about curating that experience, right?
Yeah, it is. I'm
the
that's
background
actually
color
really
was
funny
the thing
to think
too.
about, that most people's experience now writing comes down to what can you fit into this one paragraph of text about yourself? How good are you at your bio? How many emojis do you throw in there?
Exactly.
That is now the writing experience.
Emoji is worth 500 words, not quite 1,000.
500. 250.
Yeah. So then writing for me, it basically became note taking, during school, basically. And before I had 200 texts, I'm sure I probably had to write some notes to the girls, that were all like, read, talk to me. And I was like, yes. Yes. Left and right.
Yes, I will talk to you.
Yes.
Yeah. Behind the bleachers.
Yes. Meet me. At 1600 o'clock. And so then writing kind of for me went by the wayside. And besides just, I guess, emails and text messages and instant messaging, that was my form of writing. And so I kind of got, I don't know, disconnected from it. And it was this year where I started to get involved with the tool Roam Research, which we've mentioned many times on this, which is a digital note-taking software and I started to use that because I was trying to figure out ways to save things that I'm doing, right? I'm researching things. I'm creating this company. I have these ideas. How do I create these things and put them in a spot in a way where I can remember them, I can access them, I can look them up, I know they're going to be there, I can tie things together, I can do all that type of stuff without them getting lost. And so when I got involved with Roam Research, before that I was using a tool called OneNote. Another thing some people might have heard of is Evernote. And with OneNote and Evernote, some of the friction that you have is when you go to write something down, you have to choose the box it's going to go in, the folder it's going to go in. Just like when you're at school, I had a spiral for each subject or whatever, and you got to choose which one does it go in. Well, the reality is that it's not always that clean, and a lot of times, especially when you have topics that are very related, there's overlap, right? Yeah. And it's like, oh, well, this is kind of in math, but it's also in science, and it's also kind of in art too. So which notebook do I put it in? And if I'm going to find it, which notebook do I grab? And so I won't go way deep into that, but the bottom line is Roam Research makes all of that much easier for you. And so when I started getting into that, and starting using that as a tool to not only like record my ideas, but also track the things that I was doing throughout the day, I found that it was invaluable. And I had already kind of fallen into this tool, found it, liked it, but then I joined, as people might have heard if they've been listening for a while, Roam Book Club. And so I went and did one iteration of that Roam Book Club where we read How to Read a Book by...
No, he wrote Smart Notes.
Well, How to Read a Book. If you Google it, it'll come up. And then...
great author.
Yeah. Yeah, not good with the name. Sorry about that. Then as I read that book and as we got to the end of that Roam Book Club, there was a little kind of moment at the end where people talked about what Roam had done for them. And I was already sold on Roam, but then over the next, 45 minutes to 2 hours where I listened to 20 to 40 different people talk about the impact that it had on their lives, that's when I was like, wow, this is really something. There was someone who talked about how they were deeply depressed and it completely changed the way that they saw themselves, they saw the world, they changed the way that they felt. But they were also very cautious to be like, this isn't, Roam is just a tool, right? Don't think it's gonna be some magic pill or something like that, but it is a tool. And one of the things that someone said or pointed out during that call was, hey, when writing first came around, however many thousands of years ago, it literally changed the way people think, and it changed what they were able to do, because and we don't think about this very much. I feel like we just take it for granted, right? But before writing was a thing, like how do you get ideas outside of your head, right? Mm-hmm. Other than just talking, which, by the way, I don't know this, but I imagine language wasn't quite as robust as it was back then. But also there's just, when you talk, like it's gone, right? It disappears. And sure, it's in our recent memory because I just said it. But if I have something that's this big thing where it's something where I want to work on and progress and add a little today, come back another day, maybe a few years later, come back, and maybe I want to collaborate with somebody else, like there's this inherent value in getting that idea, getting that thought out of yourself onto some third-party space where it can then be looked at and discussed and added to. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, that's these kind of external tools, right? There's sort of a classic myth of this guy that basically, it's a Greek myth or something, and I'm gonna mess up the names, but this kind of king comes over and this guy's like, look, I have created this thing, it is called writing. And the king is like, oh, you think this is a great tool, but what this is going to do is people are going to use this and they're going to forget how to think. And so it's kind of an interesting idea to sort of think about, too, that as we kind of create these tools to help ourselves think, then increasingly maybe we become reliant on the tools instead of the thinking. And that was at least the kind of, and whether or not that's correct, because it's the only reason I'm bringing that up is because it sort of counteracts this idea that writing actually helps us think, because of course the books we've read, between the how to read smart, how to take smart notes, and how to read a book, they all sort of proclaim that writing is this external scaffolding that allows you to actually build ideas on top of each other, whereas previously you would keep those arguments in your head and you would have chains of logic inside your head instead of external to you. So as we increasingly get into a digital age, then we're more and more interested in keeping things external to us, and we can track the whole argument through external chains if we can just figure out where to go, rather than sort of having to sort of record and memorize mentally. So in the little myth, and this was in Neil Postman's book Technopoly. It's how he kind of starts off the book, but he starts talking about the technology of writing, and it's sort of like it's not the sort of beneficial. The king says it's not the beneficial thing he thinks it is. Postman sort of argues back against that, but then the book gets into what do we do with all the new media stuff. So we're talking about Rome research, we're talking about apps, we're talking about journaling, all these kind of things. It is interesting to think about whether the tools are using us or we're using the tools, how the tools change us, and what sort of structures in our society actually allow the tools to function or restrict their functioning. And so these are all things that he talks about in Technopoly. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, great book.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that. And, I think it's funny when you brought up that myth, because I'm thinking like, well, that sounds a lot to me like, a tweet, or like someone writing a headline. It's like, all right, well, now I'm letting the tool influence what I'm going to say, and also maybe therefore what I'm going to think. Yeah. And I'd also want to point out, like, that has been a noticeable shift for me in my internal thoughts, is as I'm going through the world, as I'm thinking, as I'm brainstorming, I can't help but think in terms of titles now. And it's like, oh, okay, well, and headlines, to put it more broadly, like, all right, if I'm going to talk about this, what is that somewhat clickbaity thing where it's like interesting, it leaves what's called the curiosity gap, where it's like, all right, here's this thing, I've piqued their interest, but now there's that gap that they want to go close, because they literally feel kind of unsettled, whether or not they realize it. And so it'll just whatever. That's kind of how I view the world. And also, like, I'm not going to sit here and pretend it doesn't affect the things that I create. But yeah, I'd like to think that at least I'm conscious about it and minimizing it.
And I would say from a personal experience, so for instance, I go to the Brooklyn Museum, and I had a little bit of difficulty with one of the shows. I was like, I can't really figure out what you're saying several things here. I think I'm supposed to be on board with all of them just by default, because it sort of falls into the current normative moral ethos of our times. And so I'm trying to sort of dig through, like, how much this kind of vagueness of the show is kind of a way to get away from being very specific. And the only way that I come to those kind of thoughts is either by journaling or writing, or going like, well, this piece was doing X, Y, and Z, and this piece was doing X, Y, and Z, and this piece was, oh wait, I see that this is a playbook now that was done in the 70s, and that playbook is for the fame of the artist, but is the actual mission that those 70s artists have still relevant if we reproduce their works today? Well, the only way I come to any of those decisions is by getting all this stuff out of my head down in front of me, so I can look at it, and then I can go, oh, these pieces are gelling together. And so there's something about writing that is fascinating in the way that your thoughts, you kind of keep regurgitating them, and all of a sudden a thread will pull out. You go, that's what I was looking for. I knew there was something going on, but I couldn't voice it. And now I'm starting to develop language around it. Yeah. And that language starts to make a cohesive argument, where before you're just like, it's like a gut reaction.
Yeah. And that transition and that history, that path of an idea, that's one of the things that attracts me the most to Rome research, is because I was in a meeting last week, and I was with a guy who I meet with in what's called a mastermind, where we're trying to help each other accomplish certain things. We meet once a week, and we say, all right, what are you trying to do next week? What'd you run into? That type of thing. And we were talking, and we were talking about what his next steps are going to be. Like, all right, well, next year, what are you going to focus on? Like, you're doing A, B, C, and D, but what of those do you want to prioritize? And then I was like, hey, back in March, you actually said this and this and this. And how do you think you've done about those things? And now that you've said that you want to do that, how does that compare to where you're at now? And I was able to do that because I clicked on his name, and I saw all of the history of the times we've met, and I could go through and then earlier in that same meeting, he's like, oh yeah, there's this thing I was looking into this one time where it had this thing, and I was like, bloop, bloop, bloop. Oh, you mean that ABC with that 1, 2, 3 guy? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, well, guess what? I had 2 clicks. Now I have all that information. And so now it's been really cool now that I've been using the software meaningfully for about, for sure 6+ months. I think I downloaded it back in January and kind of dribbled and dabbled in it, and then for sure over the last 6 months I've been using it a lot more, and that was in March, so I guess 9 months. And that it's been really cool now to be on the other side and be so far removed, but yet be like, hey, here's this valuable information that I can have. It's outside of myself. I can get a picture into what I was thinking and learning at that time, and then I can bring that into relevancy today. It's honestly, I think, the more people get in touch with that type of thing, whether it's Rome Research or using another tool, but personally, I think a Rome Research tool or a similar type of tool, Obsidian's another one that's an open source version of that. I think that's the future, and I think that's the difference between us being at this level of civilization we're at right now and the next level is where people right now, we have this information age, and we're all like, oh, we're all now connected. But we still aren't really sure the best way to do that, and we're still very much this us versus them, and nationalism, and then there's like all these in groups and out groups with all sorts of things. Well, the next step is us figuring out how we can work through all of that type of stuff to work together to put all of our great minds together to create something valuable that is bigger than ourselves and progress ourselves to the next stage. And being a part of that group and seeing a little bit behind that, and now seeing in my own life what big difference that has made. It's been really cool. And like I said, I think I put in the description for this, it changes the way you think. It changes the way you remember. It changes the way you feel. And also, by the way, tracking those things is another valuable tool. Is like, hey, wow, I realize that, I'm in a pretty piss poor mood every time after I spend 4 hours in meetings. Or, man, Jill and I got into a fight yesterday, and it seems like, now, when I wouldn't look at my day, what I did, like every time I deal with money, like I get pissed off, and maybe I lash out at other people, and so it kind of helps you get some of those insights, right? And that was some of the things that people were saying was like, I got to know me again, and I got to have my own thought, and it was really cool to see people were thinking for themselves, they were feeling for themselves, and you could tell. Even though it was just over webcam, it was one of the most real meetings I had been in, where people were really opening up and talking about how much it touched them. We're gonna turn this into a 2-parter because we're at our time for today. But any last thoughts you want to add for today?
No, that's one of the things that is so fascinating about journaling and writing and getting your own ideas down and out of your head is you can watch them grow and change, and you can see yourself change along with them. And when I got into therapy, there was a guy in there that was saying that journaling is a superpower, and I was just like, meh. But the more I've done it, yeah, I think he's right. Like, it is amazing. It is an amazing skill set. So when we're talking about the reading and writing part, reading is great, input is great, but man, that it's got to be balanced with some output.
Yeah, for sure. And that's another thing that, I've really enjoyed about Rome Research is that it's just a window I have up on my computer all day long. And I write in there and I say, oh, think about this. Oh, okay, working on this. Oh, did a search on XYZ. Here are all of the links that I looked at. So now I know next time I go, I have that starting point, right? Mm-hmm. And I can see all the things I did. And, I'll pull up examples in the future so we can go a little bit more into this and people can see what it's like. But yeah, I can't sing enough praises for it. And again, regardless of if you're using Rome or not, just writing stuff down and putting your thoughts and your feelings and your meaning into it. And, let me know if you guys have good reasons as to not write, but I've found myself at a failure, and every person I've kind of told this to, I'm like, hey, you should start doing this. This is one of the most important things I've done in my entire life. Let me repeat that. You should start doing this. This is one of the most important things I've done in my life, and I've seen it change other people's lives. And it's as simple as starting today. All you need to do is start writing down your thoughts. And when you look inside and you say, why would I not do this? Realistically, the only reasons I can think of is people are scared, or they don't know what could happen. They're afraid. I mean, can you think of any
there's
good reasons not to write?
Oh, I don't know if they're good reasons. I think there's like an ambivalence about it. Like, I'm too busy. I'm just making it through my day, and and carving off an extra 5 to 15 to 25 minutes is just too much to ask. And because there is no sort of tangible, profitable sort of thing, it doesn't seem like it's efficient in the way that's going to produce you money. It's not entertaining in the way that watching a movie is. Then it's going to be harder to do. Just because it takes just a little bit of discipline, and we've talked about how hard discipline is to come by. So, and it's also because it, once again, not productive. It's not producing anything for you. It's not doing the dishes. And so it's going to sort of be difficult, I think, for people to do it for those reasons if you haven't built it into your life in some way. And that goes all the way back to time blocking again, waking up a little earlier, trying to do something like carving off like your lunch hour and your lunch half hour maybe, and taking 10 minutes of that to write instead of to eat. Like, there's weird ways to sort of edge it in to the middle of your day.
Well, and also I think that's one of the faults of, one of the traps you can fall into with this whole journaling thing is thinking that you need to have this big time block where you sit down and it's like, all right, I learned it was important. I need to go do it, right? And for some people, they do need that structure, and they can value and work and or build on that structure where it's like, all right, every day at 7, I'm going to do it, right? But that's not the only way to do it either, right? And some of it is incorporating it into your day. For me, that's when it made the biggest difference, when it's like, it's not like a thing that I do. Like, I'm not making a thing out of it. It's just something that I do. And that may sound like semantic difference, but it's just another thing that I do, right? And it's like throughout my day, I am just writing in there, and I'm recording, and it does not always have to be a thing you do. Now, that being said, there's certainly value in making it a thing, especially if it's your first time and you're trying to build some up and start some stuff getting started. But yeah, so fortunately for you guys, for our challenge today, we actually have a journal challenge for you. And this is actually through my wife Danielle's brand, Danielle M. Garcia. I've posted it in the chat right now. And this is an easy way for you guys to get started. That's not the reason we brought up this segment. We think writing is very important, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that another day. But if you're looking for one way to get started, you can click on the link in the chat, daniellemgarcia.com. And if at the top, you can see Join My Journal Challenge. If you click on the link, it should take you straight there. And that's one journal prompt a day to get you guys started. And the nice thing about whether it's journal prompts or whatever is, like, you could take it or leave it. This isn't school, right? If you get a prompt and you're not really feeling it, like, write about something else. Write about what's on your head. Write about that thing that's been bothering you.
Write about why you don't feel that prompt.
Right.
I mean, there's a whole litany of things. Like, I have a series of journal prompts that automatically are generated through Roam. So every day I get one and it pops up, and it's like, what do you miss? What do you love? What do you hate? Like, just very simple things. How are you going to get to that next place? Like, just questions like that. And they pop up, and there's days where I'm just like, I don't want to write about that. And I was like, what I hate is these stupid journal prompts. And that just gets me started.
Right.
And sometimes that's all you really need.
Yeah, it is. And so for you guys to get started today, you can join that journal challenge there. But don't feel like that's the only way you can get started. Like, it could literally be the Apple Notes thing on your phone or your computer. It could be a voice memo, as we've mentioned before. It could be a Word document on your computer, a Google Doc, whatever. It could be literally a piece of paper. And you don't have to do anything with it, but especially if this isn't something that you've explored for yourself in the past, explore it. Try it out. And don't think you're just gonna do it for like a day or a week and it's just gonna completely change everything. I mean, it's a process. It's literally changing the way that you think and the way that you interact with the world. Like, it may be a slow build, and for some people it might be like, wow, overnight, like, perfect, great. Especially if you're someone who has memory issues, or just want to do a better job remembering things and details and stuff like that. Whether it be work-related, personal-related, or both, there is a huge value in writing. And we're going to talk a lot more about that another day. But that's been it for today. So any other last thoughts?
Yeah, there is a Knowledge Project podcast that just came out, and it's talking about Stoicism. But one of the things that Stoics do a lot is journal. And so, we'll try to throw that link in the chat as well. there's a lot of info out there if you're interested in it about ways to handle yourself moving through the world, and the idea that somehow writing or journaling is at the core of a lot of these. It's a super fascinating idea to think about, and so many of us neglect it.
Yeah. We will drop that link in the chat, and yeah, and again, so just that your challenge for today is get started writing, and it also could be just a little note to a significant other or a friend or something like, hey, I really care about you, and I really appreciate what you're doing, or hey, your zipper's untied. It doesn't all have to be
that note,
right. Yeah. Or if you're like Reed back in high school and you're just like, oh, here you go, girl. Here you go, lady. Here you go.
Hey,
just
girl.
whatever. You just get back into the art of writing, and you be prepared to potentially let that change the way you view the world. And if you're still doubting us, you're like, I don't know, Reed, I don't get it. Well, tune in next time when we talk about writing, so you can hear a little bit more about why we think it's so important. But with that, everybody have a wonderful day. We'll see y'all next time.